I hope I can fit within this time, but thank you very much for coming to the morning shift this beautiful morning. My company is called Amped Energy. We've been around since about 2015, but in about 2018, we were approached by a construction company that said to us, can you do anything about our diesel generators that we use on site to power our equipment? So we worked very, very closely with them to kind of look at their sites and understand the power needs, and worked out that yes, you could in fact use a lithium-ion battery storage unit to power construction sites. It worked technically and it solved a lot of the problems with diesel generators, and it could be done at a cost that the construction company could look at, either the same price or cheaper than a diesel generator. So from that point on, we focused our company on one mission, which is an emission-free future for construction. So emissions being carbon emissions, air quality pollutants, which are bad for health, and then noise emissions on construction sites as well. I'm sure we've all been around construction sites and know that they can be very smelly and they can be very noisy as well. So that was our focus. As a lot of you may know, the world is developing at a very fast rate, and our cities are growing to the extent that the UN says we need to grow a city. We need to build a city the size of Paris every single week for the next 40 years. That's going to be a lot of construction. There's also increasing amount of electricity needs on construction sites because more and more electric vehicles are coming along. A lot of the equipment, the digital equipment being used, needs electricity too. But the problem is diesel is being banned around the world because of the health impacts it has on people. So we really need a solution. The problem today is very much that either you can't get any power at all to a construction site or you can't get enough because our grids are already stretched. And so what happens is people either use generators completely or they supplement what they have, the grid power that they have, with generators, often using them to power large equipment like cranes and hoists and welders. Diesel generators, as I mentioned, very, very noisy. They actually cause hearing issues with a lot of construction workers. They break a lot. They're old technology and they need to be refueled, which means there's a lot of downtime. You have to handle diesel. Diesel is a messy and horrible piece of liquid to handle. They're very old equipment, so there's no data back from them. They have a very high carbon footprint, and they emit very, very noxious fumes on the site. So we worked together with this construction company to build the very first cloud-connected energy storage system specifically designed for the construction sector. So this is incredibly easy to deploy, very safe, very simple to use. All the data we get back is focused on the construction sector. And we deployed the first one at the end of 2019. And what we discovered is it solves a lot of those issues around diesel generators. It's almost silent. There are some fans on it, so it creates some noise. Automatically recharges itself. No diesel hazards associated with it. It's connected to the internet, so every 5 seconds we're getting back data to show on the operations of this unit, but also the equipment attached to it. It's up to 85, actually in the UK up to 90% less CO2 compared to diesel generators, and no air quality pollutants emitted at site. So like I said, we deployed the first two at the end of 2019. And since that point, we've scaled the business across 4 countries, soon to be 5 countries. We have more than 180 units in the deployment. Operational hours, almost 2 million hours now. Across 50 customers, we have a very, very high reliability, much higher than diesel generators. We've been on over 150 projects. And what does that mean in terms of impact? In terms of impact, we have mitigated 25,000 tons of carbon up to this point. And then if you look at air quality pollutants, it's equivalent to 48,000 cars taken off the road in terms of air quality pollutants. So we're making a big impact for each one of these that we deploy. We were recognized last year by the Earthshot as one of their finalists in the clean air category, the Prince William's Prize, which has been fantastic for us. So how does it work? If you look at construction equipment, like cranes and hoists and welders, they require very high power. So just to give an example of a crane, cranes, when it lifts, requires a very high power peak. But if you look at across the day, it only requires that power very, very, very small percentage of the time. Most of the time, it's actually just sitting there powering a light or an air conditioner or something like that. So in this case, 95% of the time, it really doesn't need much power. But what happens in construction is they put a very large diesel generator on it just so it can provide that one peak during 5% of that day. The rest of the time it sits there idling. So like a very, very, very big car idling all the time, burning diesel, pushing out pollutants. So what we do with our battery is you can take a much smaller connection to continually fill up the battery, and then the battery handles those very large power needs on the output. And the trick that we have to do is make sure that the battery never runs out of energy. So I kind of talk about this like a water tank. So you have an inbound pipe, which is very small, constantly trickle feeding a tank. And they have a large pipe on the output, which only sends out water or power when it's needed. And that has worked very well. So this is an example of one of our units powering 2 cranes. Those 2 cranes would usually require 2 300 kVA generators, so about 600 amps of power. We can use 1 battery for those 2 cranes. And if you use a 25 amp input that would usually require 600 amps, you barely go below 50% of the battery capacity. If you use a 35 amp input, you barely go below 80% of the capacity. So essentially you can run all day. If the power completely goes, you can run the site usually for a day and a half as well. And that's usually enough time for the power to come back up again. So what are we powering today? We're powering cranes and hoists, welders and bar benders, starting to look at concrete batching plants, which often run on diesel generators, site offices, which are very frequently run on diesel generators as well. So, very happily, our first case study in the UK is actually on this site. There are 3 of our units powering 3 of those cranes over there that you can see. So you can walk past them. You can actually even look in and see one of our units. That's a Lang O'Rourke project to redevelop Olympia. And we're powering 3 of the largest cranes available in the UK. And we're powering something which usually requires 400 amp on a 16 amp connection. That 16 amp connection was previously used to power the light on top of the crane. And they were using a diesel generator to power the crane. We're using a battery with that connection to power the whole thing. On that project, we've saved already up to 192 tons of carbon per year. It's the equivalent of 1,000 cars in air pollution. Operating costs are 70% lower for the contractor. It's almost silent, and there's been incredibly positive feedback from them just in terms of the operation. They were having a diesel generator break every 3 weeks. And so for the guy who managed that, it was a nightmare. And so with our unit, it's been running flawlessly the whole time. This is another site that we've deployed in the UK up in Stoke, the Stoke goods yard. In this case, we're actually powering 2 cranes with 1 Enertainer. We've removed two 500 kVA gensets, 2 punch flybrids, which is a way of making the genset more efficient, and a fuel tank. That's huge space saving for construction as well. It's been a 90% reduction in carbon, significantly low operating costs, very quiet again, and there's been very, very good feedback from them on the space saving and the saved time from bringing diesel in and refueling and all those things. This contractor, which is Bomer and Kirkland, is rolling this out across many more sites now. The other thing that we've built in from the beginning is a telematics platform on the unit, which gives the operators to understand what's going on with things. So if there is a maintenance problem, they'll be pinged. They'll get a notification. You can also look at how busy the crane was during the day. This gives carbon reduction information as well. And you can download reports and so on, which you might need for sustainability reporting, energy, analyzing your energy use and all those kind of things. So I've already mentioned most of these environmental benefits. We also have been used for green financing in a lot of situations. We benefit the community around the sites. And making that working environment safer by not using diesel is very important. These are all the operational benefits from a customer point of view. They get a lot more data transparency. We constantly update the unit through software, like an iPhone. We've designed it for reliability, so if one part goes down, it doesn't bring down the whole unit. It maximizes productivity because you don't need maintenance, and you need very little maintenance, and usually that's regular maintenance, and there's no refueling downtime. Interestingly, it relieves traffic congestion because diesel trucks coming into sites causes traffic congestion on the roads and also in the site itself. And we've had people tell us it prolongs the equipment life of the unit because often you can still power it at nighttime, which allows the crane, in this case, to kind of run its system so it doesn't have any maintenance issues. So anyway, did I hit my time?
You're perfect.
Excellent.
Look at you. All right, we've got a question over here.
You rent them out. You rent them rather than buy them.
Sorry?
Can you rent them rather than buy them?
Yeah, so we will sell to customers, and we also have partners who can rent them to you as well. So we already have that set up in the UK.
Just a question on diesel gensets and hybrid systems. How do you compare to kind of the hybrid, where you have a diesel genset connected to a battery as well?
So we can be charged by any source of power. So we've designed it to be able to be charged by the grid, by solar, and also by diesel gensets. So we've kind of provided that flexibility. Some customers, I think, some products have built in the diesel generator into the unit, but we want to provide flexibility. It's not ideal to be charged by a diesel generator, but it's still 60 to 70% lower carbon than if you power this equipment directly with a generator. So there is still a big advantage to it. Obviously, hopefully in the future, there'll be hydrogen generators. There'll be more and more use of solar, although solar in urban environments is hard because of space, of course. But yeah, so we want to design the battery to be able to leapfrog diesel completely, but if it is also reducing diesel, that's obviously a benefit too.
Talk to us maybe about the reality of the sales cycle in this sector. I'm going to guess it's pretty slow.
So
it's
interesting. So it's slow at first with every new company that we work with. And we were very lucky to work with a construction company to start with, because they obviously gave us the showcase that we could do, make sure, and they were a very, very tough construction company. They wanted a lot of things done, which in retrospect has been fantastic for us, because we built a product which had a lot of the answers that people were going to ask us anyway in future. So the product was from the ground up built to be very, very applicable for the construction sector. In terms of sales cycle, yeah, every time we talk to a new construction company, there's often cynicism, especially on the cost saving part, which is the thing that the construction companies want to look at. More and more they're looking at the carbon side too, and so that's great, because that's a good conversation as well. But we spend a lot of time, we usually take a site that they have and say, look, give us all your equipment that you have on that site, how much power it requires. We'll build you a proposal, show us your diesel costs, show us your grid costs. We'll build you a proposal and show you what this looks like from a cost saving and from a carbon saving point of view. And then if usually that's positive and it goes ahead and we deploy with them, that might take 6 months, potentially 3 to 6 months. Once it's on the site and being used for the first time, people very quickly realize the big benefits to it, the operational benefits. So, and then it gets spread out. This is what's happening in the UK now. What I've seen is usually we get introduced by the innovation teams or the sustainability teams, or sometimes a senior executive who has this as their project that they want. As soon as on site, the site teams are actually the ones that push for it, because they don't like breathing in diesel pollution. They don't like the noise that it makes. They actually don't like having to manage these things, because it takes time away from the day to have to manage these things. So once that's on board, the guy who's worked on one site moves to another site, he then wants to use our product. So once we're in, it spreads pretty quickly.
Got it. Oh.
Hi. Oh, God, sorry. So I see that you had some work in Hong Kong. Are you deployed there as well? As in, have you got any Hong Kong and markets? Where are you?
Yeah, no, it's true. So we are founded in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is still a very international city. We were founded there by our CEOs from Brunei. We're a collection of people from all over the world building the company out of Hong Kong, and that was our first market. So our first customer is a company called Gammon, who is a subsidiary of Balfour Beatty from the UK. And so they really got us started, very forward-thinking construction company. And Hong Kong's been good because it's still a good international interface. So we've leapfrogged from them to Singapore, Australia, the UK, and then we're looking at other markets this year as well.